The most dangerous person in any confrontation isn't the loudest or the strongest, it's the calmest. When the air fills with tension, when voices rise and fists tighten, the natural human instinct is to match that energy with equal or greater force. We have been conditioned to believe that aggression equals power, that the one who barks the loudest commands the room, and that dominance is won through the sheer velocity of our reactions. But this is a profound illusion, an evolutionary trap that leaves us vulnerable to our own biology and the manipulations of those who wish to destabilize us. True power does not announce itself through noise, nor does it seek validation through a display of temper. Instead, it resides in an unshakable, terrifying stillness. This is the profound paradox that Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary 17th century samurai, understood better than perhaps any warrior in human history. He did not merely survive in an era of absolute brutality, he mastered it, remaining entirely undefeated across 60 consecutive duels to the death. His opponents were masters of the blade, men of immense physical strength and flawless technique, yet they all fell before him. They did not lose because Musashi possessed a faster strike or a sharper sword. They lost because they allowed the storm of conflict to enter their minds, while Musashi remained the quiet center around which their chaos collapsed. He recognized that long before a sword is drawn, a battle is either won or lost within the hidden architecture of the human psyche. Today, our battlefields have shifted from muddy roads and blood-stained fields to corporate boardrooms, heated family dinners, toxic digital spaces, and sudden street encounters. The weapons are no longer made of steel, but the underlying psychological warfare remains identical. When someone challenges you, insults your intelligence, or pushes your emotional boundaries, your body instantly treats that interaction as a mortal threat. In an instant, a cascade of stress hormones floods your bloodstream. Your heart begins to hammer against your ribs, your muscles contract with defensive tension, and your cognitive vision narrows down to a microscopic point of survival. This is the ancient amygdala hijack, an evolutionary relic designed to keep us alive against predators, but one that completely cripples our ability to navigate modern social complexities. When you fall into this trap, you effectively hand over the keys to your behavior to the person provoking you. You cease to be a conscious agent acting on your own behalf. Instead, you become a puppet, dancing to the tune of their hostility. Musashi observed this exact failure in his adversaries. He noticed that the moment an opponent became angry, impatient, or deeply fearful, their movements became rigid, their choices predictable, and their ultimate defeat inevitable. They became their emotions. If they felt anger, their sword served that anger. If they felt pride, their actions defended that pride. In doing so, they completely lost sight of their true goal, which was survival and victory. To counter this, Musashi formulated a systematic approach to emotional control centered around what we now understand as intellectual and emotional distance. He described this mental state as observing a confrontation as if you are standing on a high mountain, looking down at the clouds passing below. The clouds may rage, thunder may roll, and rain may pour, but the mountain remains entirely unaffected by the weather. It simply observes. When you practice emotional distance in the modern world, you are creating a vital, protective buffer between the external stimulus and your internal response. Most people operate on a purely reactive plane, where stimulus equals immediate response. Someone yells at you, and you immediately yell back. Someone demeans your work, and you instantly launch into a defensive justification. But wisdom dictates that your greatest power lies within that tiny, overlooked gap between what happens to you and how you chooses to act. When an insult is hurled your way, instead of allowing that toxic energy to penetrate your identity and trigger an automatic defense mechanism, you learn to step back mentally. You observe the sensation of rising anger as an external phenomenon, rather than internalizing it as who you are. There is a profound, transformative difference between telling yourself I am angry and observing I notice the sensation of anger rising within me. The moment you label the emotion in this objective manner, you disarm its control over your behavior. You are no longer the storm. You are the sky witnessing the storm pass through. Musashi actively cultivated this mental position by placing himself in increasingly volatile, unpredictable situations, proving that calm is not a passive trait you are born with, but a psychological muscle that must be intentionally trained under pressure. In his most legendary confrontation against the celebrated swordsman Sasaki Kojiro, Musashi didn't rely on superior physical exertion. Kojiro was a man of immense talent, known for his lethal speed and his unyielding pride. Understanding his opponent's psychological makeup, Musashi deliberately arrived hours late to the duel, leaving Kojiro waiting on a desolate beach under a burning sun. By the time Musashi stepped off his boat, Kojiro was consumed by a blinding, impatient rage. He threw away his scabbard in anger, an act that prompted Musashi to calmly note that Kojiro had already lost. For a true master never discards the protection of his weapon out of spite. Kojiro fought from a place of wounded ego, his vision clouded by the emotional tempest within him. Musashi, conversely, remained entirely detached, viewing the entire interaction with cold, mathematical precision. He saw Kojiro's openings before Kojiro even realized he was exposed. This historical truth serves as a stark reminder for our daily lives. The individuals who successfully provoke you, who manage to break your composure and pull you down into the mud of arguments, ultimately control you. When you react with immediate defense, you validate their aggression and participate in a script they have authored. By adopting Musashi's principle of emotional distance, you break the script entirely. You refuse to offer them the predictable, emotional payload they are seeking. Instead, you meet their chaos with an unnerving, absolute silence that forces them to confront their own instability. Modern neuroscience completely validates this ancient samurai practice, showing that when we consciously name and observe our emotions from a distance, we shift neural activity away from the primitive, emotional centers of the brain and activate the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, strategy, and deliberate reasoning. This simple act of mental stepping back calms our biology and restores our higher cognitive faculties, giving us the clarity to see the confrontation for what it truly is, a test of boundaries, an insecurity projecting outward, or a strategic manipulation. By mastering this first pillar of detachment, you cease to be a casualty of the emotional environment, laying the essential psychological foundation required to completely dismantle any modern conflict before it can dismantle you. Once you have established emotional distance, separating yourself from the immediate chaos of a provocation, you gain the mental clarity required to execute Musashi's second profound principle: anticipatory awareness. Musashi referred to this as foreknowledge, a heightened state of observation that allows an individual to sense the trajectory of a conflict before it physically manifests. In his legendary strategic text, the Book of Five Rings, he emphasized that a true warrior must see that which is distant as if it were close, and that which is close as if it were distant. This is not a mystical power or a form of mind reading. It is the deliberate application of intense pattern recognition applied to human behavior. When an individual succumbs to anger, pride, or fear, their cognitive boundaries constrict, forcing them to follow highly predictable paths of action. They lose their capacity for original thought, and instead rely on a limited script written by their insecurities. Musashi spent his entire life obsessively studying these human patterns, recognizing that if you know the emotional architecture of your opponent, you can accurately predict their next 5 moves before they even form the intention to make them. This is the exact mental framework employed by master chess players. They do not guess what their opponent will do, they read the board, recognize the structural patterns, and understand the inevitable consequences of specific pressures. When you apply this level of strategic foresight to modern interpersonal conflict, you fundamentally alter how your biology responds to stress. There is a vast psychological difference between sudden stress and expected stress. When a confrontation catches you completely by surprise, your nervous system interprets the unexpected shock as an immediate crisis, dumping a massive wave of adrenaline into your body that triggers an overwhelming, chaotic fight or flight response. However, when you anticipate a challenge, your brain processes the scenario differently. It prepares your physiology with deliberate care, releasing much smaller, controlled amounts of stress hormones that actually sharpen your cognitive focus, heighten your situational awareness, and stabilize your emotional baseline without clouding your judgment. Musashi demonstrated this masterclass in anticipation during his preparation for his ultimate duel against Sasaki Kojiro. He did not simply show up to the beach and hope for the best. He studied Kojiro's behavioral history, his temperament, and his specific combat preferences. He knew Kojiro utilized an exceptionally long sword known as the drying pole, a weapon that gave him a distinct advantage in reach. Recognizing this pattern beforehand, Musashi used his time on the boat ride to the duel to deliberately carve a custom wooden sword out of a ship's oar, intentionally making it slightly longer than Kojiro's famous blade. By anticipating the precise physical and psychological parameters of the conflict, Musashi neutralized his opponent's greatest advantage before the first blow was even struck. In our modern daily interactions, you can develop this precise level of strategic foresight by adopting a simple 30-second mental habit before entering any potentially volatile situation. Whenever you anticipate a difficult meeting, a confrontation with a defensive colleague, or a tense conversation with a family member, pause and ask yourself 3 diagnostic questions. What is this person's current emotional baseline? What do they genuinely want to achieve or protect in this interaction? What are the 3 most likely ways they will lash out or deflect when challenged? By answering these questions beforehand, you effectively train your brain to recognize the behavioral script before it unfolds. If you know a particular manager automatically criticizes new ideas out of a deep-seated fear of losing control, or if you know a friend always deflects accountability by bringing up past, unrelated grievances, their subsequent reactions lose all power to shock or upset you. You have already seen their moves on the mental chessboard. You remove the toxic element of emotional surprise, transforming what would have been a chaotic, reactive shouting match into a predictable, navigable scenario. This exact principle explains why elite modern operators, such as experienced FBI hostage negotiators, spend a massive amount of time profiling their subjects before entering a dialogue. They do not wing it. They dissect past behaviors to predict exact emotional turning points, allowing them to remain completely unshakable when the other party panics, screams, or threatens violence. Anticipatory awareness systematically strips the power away from an aggressor, shifting the dynamic from an unpredictable emotional exchange to a calculated game where you hold the map. Yet, maintaining intellectual foresight is only half the battle. You must also anchor your physical body to ensure your biology does not betray your strategy. This transitions us directly into Musashi's third foundational pillar, strategic breathing. Throughout his extensive writings on martial strategy, Musashi maintained that complete mastery of the mind is entirely impossible without absolute mastery of the breath. He observed that the moment a swordsman allowed fear, hesitation, or malice to enter his mind, his respiratory pattern altered immediately, becoming shallow, rapid, gasping, and uneven. To counter this vulnerability, Musashi integrated specific, rigorous breathing disciplines into his daily martial training, ensuring that his breath remained deep and steady, even while executing lethal maneuvers. Your respiratory system is the direct, bi-directional bridge between your conscious mind and your autonomic nervous system. When you experience a sudden psychological threat, your body naturally shifts into a sympathetic state, shortening your breath to prepare for physical combat. However, because this system operates on a feedback loop, you can actively reverse the process. By deliberately forcing your breath to slow down and deepen, you send an undeniable biological signal to your brain that you are completely safe. This mechanical intervention instantly activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the biological mechanism responsible for rest, recovery, and cognitive restoration. While your opponent is drowning in the erratic, panic-inducing biology of shallow breathing, you are actively forcing your body into a state of supreme calm. Musashi utilized a specific, controlled breathing pattern during the critical, high-stakes moments of a duel, inhaling deeply and smoothly through his nose for a count of 4, holding that breath momentarily to center his gravity, and then executing a slow, measured, controlled exhalation through his mouth for a count of 6. This simple, elegant, 4 to 6 breathing pattern is a flawless biological tool that you can deploy instantly in any modern confrontation. Whether you are sitting in a high-stress performance review, enduring a verbal attack from a stranger, or preparing to deliver incredibly difficult news, utilizing this precise respiratory cadence will instantly suppress your heart rate, stop your hands from shaking, and clear the mental fog of adrenaline. By combining the mental shield of emotional distance, the strategic map of anticipatory awareness, and the biological anchor of strategic breathing, you construct an impregnable fortress of composure. You achieve the physiological and psychological equilibrium required to think clearly under fire, ensuring that your next move is dictated not by a blind urge to survive, but by a conscious, deliberate choice to win. Maintaining physical composure and intellectual foresight provides you with an immense advantage, but true mastery over a confrontation requires a clear direction for that energy, leading directly to Musashi's fourth foundational principle, purposeful action. Musashi noted that the vast majority of individuals enter a conflict entirely fueled by the raw velocity of their emotions, fighting simply because they are angry, defensive, or wounded in their pride. They allow the immediate friction of the argument to dictate their behavior, transforming the interaction into a chaotic spiral of personal attacks, irrelevant grievances, and escalated hostility. Musashi, however, fought with an entirely different mindset. He never engaged in a duel simply to express an emotion or to defend a fragile ego. Every step he took, every feint he executed, and every swing of his blade was strictly subordinated to a singular, overarching, long-term objective. In the Book of Five Rings, he explicitly warned against the danger of fighting with the mere intention of striking your opponent, advising instead that every movement must be firmly anchored to your ultimate goal. When you anchor yourself to a defined purpose, the entire dynamic of a modern confrontation shifts completely in your favor. You stop playing their game by their rules. In a typical workplace disagreement or personal argument, the provocateur wants you to lose your temper, become defensive, or make an emotional statement that they can later use against you. If you react to their insults, you are validating their script. But when you maintain absolute focus on your true purpose, you remain entirely insulated from their emotional bait. Before you speak a single word in a tense interaction, you must clarify your objective in one explicit sentence, asking yourself what specific outcome actually serves your long-term career, relationship, or personal peace. Once you define this anchor, you silently repeat it to yourself as the confrontation heats up, allowing it to act as a psychological weight that prevents your attention from being swept away by momentary provocations. If your purpose is to secure a project approval, it does not matter if a colleague questions your experience. You do not waste breath defending your resume, you simply redirect the conversation back to the data that secures the approval. Your words and actions align exclusively with your objective, converting your calm from a passive shield into an active strategic force that systematically steers the interaction exactly where you want it to go. Purposeful action does not mean you suppress your human emotions. It means you masterfully command them, ensuring your feelings serve your ultimate goals rather than allowing your goals to be completely hijacked by your feelings. This is the ultimate culmination of Musashi's entire psychological system, where emotional distance creates the necessary space, anticipatory awareness provides the essential foresight, strategic breathing stabilizes your physiological baseline, and purposeful action directs that combined composure toward a meaningful, decisive outcome. At this elevated level, Musashi's strategy transcends basic conflict management and aligns perfectly with the ancient philosophical concepts of Eastern wisdom. By consciously creating emotional distance, you are actively practicing the Buddhist discipline of non-attachment, refusing to let your sense of self become entangled with passing, reactive thoughts. Through the application of anticipatory awareness and strategic breathing, you learn to observe the natural transience of emotional states, recognizing that an opponent's rage is merely a temporary storm that will eventually exhaust itself if left unmet by resistance. Furthermore, by executing purposeful action without emotional friction, you embody the profound Taoist principle of Wu Wei, or effortless action, flowing around obstacles with fluid grace rather than crashing against them in a destructive display of ego. This timeless approach is more desperately needed today than at any other point in human history, as we live in a hyper-reactive, digital era engineered specifically to exploit our emotional vulnerabilities. Social media algorithms are intentionally designed to provoke our outrage. Political structures thrive on bitter division, and the constant stress of modern life has systematically eroded our collective patience, leaving people ready to explode over the minor inconveniences of daily existence. The average modern human faces more psychological confrontations in a single week through texts, emails, and comments than a 17th century samurai might have faced in an entire year. The great tragedy of our time is that while the demand for emotional self-control has reached an all-time high, our actual practice of it has plummeted to an all-time low, with people instantly sabotaging their careers, marriages, and reputations over a single moment of unmonitored anger. In this chaotic landscape, the person who possesses the rare ability to maintain absolute calm doesn't just win a petty argument, they access a supreme level of psychological clarity that allows them to see opportunities, patterns, and solutions that everyone else is completely blind to. When you watch a true master of emotional control navigate a high-stakes crisis, they seem to operate in an entirely different dimension of time, effortlessly diffusing hostility and commanding the room without ever raising their voice. Ultimately, mastering this internal martial art reveals a beautiful, hidden truth that few ever discover. The vast majority of the confrontations we encounter in life are completely unnecessary. When you intentionally stop responding automatically to every provocation thrown your way, you will watch countless conflicts simply dissolve into nothingness without your participation. You realize that true power never requires you to show up to every argument you are invited to. The most dangerous, unshakable person is not the one who fiercely wins every single confrontation, but the one who has mastered themselves so completely that they only choose to engage in the battles that truly matter.